idiocy of clubs. Someone shot nostalgia back. Someone shot our innocence.
Midnight. The room was illuminated by the blue flicker of the TV. Outside, snow fell in a soft, slow drift. The cold fire crackled and stacked, its embers all aglow. On the screen, an old black and white creepy, the beautiful pale girl recoiling in horror as the elegant vampire moved in for the seductive kill. Daniel saw it too, and this kicked off a conversation about all the old Dracula movies that we had loved since our youth. Daniel's strict mother had banned him from seeing them, which naturally led an added illicit thrill to his sneak viewings. We talked about all the vampires, the suave Christopher Lee, the hideous Max Schreck as the original terrifying Nosferatu, the effective latter-day portrayal by Klaus Kinski in Herzog's atmospheric version of Return, Carl Theodor Dreyer's early silent masterpiece, Vampire, and then there was Bela Lugosi. At the time, I had an excruciatingly boring job in a warehouse, packing up wholesale goods for delivery. I always had pockets full of address labels, and they came in handy on this occasion when I was suddenly seized by inspiration on the bicycle ride home. White on white, translucent, black cones, back on the rafter. Bela Lugosi's dead. By the time I got home, I had the whole thing scrawled out on the backs of those yellow labels. I couldn't wait to take it to band practice that night. We just acquired the use of a room at the corner of Gold Street in Northampton. We decked out this dingy space with black plastic bin liners and low lighting, including a UV strip and strobe, and consequently felt at home, like bats in a cave. I handed the note sheet to Peter and strapped on the bass. Daniel said that he'd come up with an idea, a chord progression that utilised the device of playing semi-bar chords but leaving the two top strings open. One for the musos there. And this chord progression was actually stolen from Gary Glitter's Rock and Roll Parts 1 and 2. Kevin started to play a bossa nova rhythm. He'd been taking lessons from an old jazz guy. This is one of 2 beats that he knew. And I underpinned the whole thing with a simple descending bass line. Peter started to sing. It was a kind of miracle, as we all just fell in with each other. It was as if we had been playing a strange song for years. All the parts fitted perfectly into place, and all of a sudden we had a fully formed 9-minute epic on our hands. Magic out of the blue. After that first run-through, we all looked at each other excitedly and started to laugh. "Let's do it again," Daniel said, and so we did. We debuted the song, our first 4-way collaboration, at our next gig on January the 3rd at the Romney Pub in Kingsthorpe, much to the amusement of the middle-aged golfers who had strayed in from the links across the road. A couple of weeks later, we entered Beck Studios in Wellingborough to record the track along with 4 other originals. This, our first recording session, was presided over and engineered by the studio's owner, Derek Tompkins, who appeared through a thick fog of cigarette smoke at the rear of the narrow control room. He was carrying a can of air freshener, which he proceeded to spray with liberal abandon. He then swallowed several aspirin, which he washed down with coffee from the flask. A tall, slender man in his mid-50s, with lank silver-grey hair, carpet slippers, and a pronounced stutter, Tompkins had built the 8-track studio himself, and as acquainted as he was with its homemade idiosyncrasies, he would occasionally disappear under the mixing console, pliers and screwdriver in hand, to fix some snag or other. At one point during the session, he came into the control room to discover him laid flat out on his back, with his legs sticking out from under the desk. "It's all been too much for Derek," Daniel laughed. Derek's background in recording consisted mostly of working with Irish show bands, folk duos, comedy acts like the Barron Knights and the crooner Frank Ifield. He did have very good ears though, and he was certainly open-minded. Plus the fact that he was not some young hipster, but someone from outside of our own scene held great appeal. The studio itself had a very homely feel to it, with its warm, funky red and brown carpet, comfy old couch, a coffee table which was dominated by Derek's huge exploding ashtray, and a little kitchen brewing up tea. It's a great place. When it came to the recording of Bella, Derek quickly mic'd up the drum kit, announced, and then simply rolled tape. as we played the track through. One live take, vocals and all, and that take was the one. It was the first time that Peter had ever sung into a studio mic. Derek then showed Daniel how to use his marvellous analog delay unit, which was operated by a slider that increased or decreased the effect. Derek had recorded several reggae artists, and he was correct in recognising that there was a dub aspect about that. By the end of the 3-hour session, we had 5 tracks recorded and mixed. Before wrapping up, Derek wanted to do one edit on Bella in order to lose a bun note played by yours truly, which induced a now laughable state of panic in me as he wielded a razor blade and spliced the tape. "Hey!" I blurted out. "What the hell are you doing?" What am I doing?" he replied. "I'm making you sound like you can play that bloody thing." Derek smiled and made the necessary cut. So there you go. That's from the opening chapter to the book. And the backing that was playing this is rather interesting. It's a time-stretched version of Bela Lugosi's Dead, which lasts for 9 hours. This reading will be released. It's not going to last for 9 hours. But yeah, 9 hours. We thought we were pushing it at 9 minutes. There you go. Interesting stuff. So, without further ado,
I've lost my plectrum. This always happens. I don't believe how many plectrums I've lost. It's supposed to be a very smooth segue, you know. Atmospheric and moody. It's red and it's reddish. Thank you. Very nice. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed. 8 hours and 13 minutes.
I'm ready.
You ready? I like you. We can do 2 and then they can have phase. There you go. We decided to add this song. It's an 11th hour addition to the set. I don't usually play it, but I'll play it tonight. So, this is observational. It's about those lovely goth girls of Southern California. Took his clothes, cigarette in a black coffin lunchbox. She falls into a cube on her wall. She has an adult fantasy. She's with a stat meets Peter Murphy on a one-night stroll through a graveyard uniform. Goth girls in Southern California, so pale in the carcinogenic sun. The pool is not for mud, the beach is a bitch and no fun. Goth girls don't like that California sun. Goth girls in Southern California, goth girls in Southern California. It's so proud. She drums a kick we call. Works in the mortuary, loves a flower arrangements. Now the night shift is the shift where she belongs. Choo-choo, tarot, voodoo, she has Daniel, Ashen, effigy. Sisters of Mercy, downloaded as an MP3. Corsets, chains and chokers, and an amulet to guarantee magic of protection from bimbos, jocks who pass swiftly, play football at water ski. She's slow motion dancing, happy to be sad in a dungeon. The sepulchral lighting suits her mood. She wears a heart on her sleeve, and her sleeve is made out of velvet. There's a pussy cat under that attitude. Goth girls in Southern California, so pale in the carcinogenic sun. The pool is anathema, the beach is a bitch and no fun. 'Cause goth girls don't like that California. Goth girls don't dig that California. Goth girls don't need no stinking California sun. Goth girls in Southern California, goth girls in Southern California, goth girls in Southern California, goth girls in Southern Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your patience as well, getting this whole debacle together. And thanks to Christina Stanley. Lovely violet. She didn't make any mistakes, I made a mistake. Can we go back to the sepulchral, the semi-sepulchral. So we're going to open it up now for Q&A. I'm going to change my goggles so I can see you. So, yes, any questions are welcome, but preferably something to do with the book. Tangential, at least. So, fire away. Yes.
What was it like meeting Burroughs?
Scary. I mean, I've been a Burroughs aficionado since I was 15 and read everything I could get my hands on, understood half of it, read every interview because I've always found his interviews really fascinating. And the way I met Burroughs, and I don't know if you've read this in the book, but it was my first attempt at some practical magic, because I was also, as well as reading about Burroughs, I was reading about magic and about a process which is known as the sigil magic, where you write down a desire as simple as possible, just one sentence, and then you extract any letters that occur more than once, and you discard the others, and with those letters you make a symbol that represents your desire. You memorize it, you set fire to it, and you let it go out into the universe. And my first attempt at this was, I want to meet William Burroughs. And then a few months later, out of the blue, I get an invite to go to Toronto to perform at what was billed as his 70th birthday party. But it was a spoken word event in a beautiful theatre. Jim Carroll was on the bill, and John Giorno and Mr. Burroughs. And I can't say that it was not intimidating, but he was very gentlemanly, and he received us with good grace. And then I met him later on. I visited his place in Lawrence, Kansas, and that concluded with a snake hunt. He took me on a snake. I had his stick, 2 prongs, and you catch the snakes. There's poisonous snakes because he was protecting his cats. He had all these cats. And he would put them in cages and study them and adore them. He loved snakes. And then release them into the woods. And just before I left, because I had to get my skates on to go and get the plane, because we were on tour, it's the Love Rockets tour. The local newspaper came to the door, so he goes up and picks it up. Opens up the front page, and he reads it out loud. It was, "Anti-drugs crusader, gun down. Peel me an onion and I'll cry." So that was a great parting note. So yes, any more? Yes.
Is that about the type of mic stand that Peter hit you in the head with on stage? About that heft?
That is exactly. Yes, the blunt instrument that caused a lot of damage. Yeah, knocked me out cold. Because he would do this thing. You scared that, right? You know. It's pretty damn heavy. Right in the face, smashed my glasses. I was out cold. Whoa. Then carried up to Magazine's dressing room because we were on tour with them. They kindly vacated the dressing room, but as I was going up the stairs, they were passing in it, and I was hearing these comments just sort of coming round. Fucking hell! Look at the state of him. I'm just like, wow. And I get up there and I lie on this table, and I could feel this cartoon-like bump actually getting bigger. Anyway, you know, I had a cold compress on it, and eventually went back down to our dressing room,
The culprit was in the room, and not a word of sympathy. Not one iota, which actually hurt more than the bang on the head, to be honest. But yeah, it's one of those. Lethal, in the wrong hands, dangerous weapon. Yes. Yes.
Did you have friends and acquaintances help you with your memories in the book writing process? Like, was Kevin there helping you remember getting your facts straight?
Kevin was definitely not there. Nobody was there. It was just me in a room on my own. I do my own office hours, which were I start at noon and then write for 2 hours, then have a break, and then resume for another hour, then have a stiff drink. But it was what I drew on were all my diaries and journals that I kept since 1980, and some of which were quite detailed, especially the conversations, which I'd written down verbatim at the time. If I found them amusing or ridiculous or worthy of notation. So I had all that to draw on. And I had a wonderful timeline that was put together by a friend of mine, Andrew Brooksbank, who's kind of like a super fan. He's written a book about the house as well, called Beneath the Mask. But that was very, very detailed. Every radio session, every gig, what I had in my sandwich, was caught on a Thursday in 1985. It was pretty scary, but very detailed and invaluable. So those were my little stepping stones to retread that treacherous path. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering if when you look back on various experiments and recording sessions and things like that, do you have moments of innovation or experiment where you kind of finally look back on how exciting it was to make that sound or this sound or those kinds of moments of creation?
Yeah, my recollection of those moments comes back vividly.
Right.
And it's actually, if I just play the record, I can recall pretty much where I was standing in the studio, and if it was down to a particular sound that was quite often, we would get an effects unit, and that would be the spark for a new song. Certainly with Bela Lugosi, that echo unit, the delay unit they had in the studio, became an integral part of that record. And we didn't even know that thing was there, It was just on the spur of the moment. But for example, there's a track, Double Dare, which is very sort of bass heavy, and the bass is very heavily distorted. And that was a little, very cheap Japanese fuzz box that I had. It was the first time I used it. And just something about that particular sound. If I hadn't had that box, I don't think that track would exist, certainly not in the form that it does. So yes, it's all there.
On that same album, there's some sort of kind of like vocal recordings, almost like dictaphone sounds. Do you know what I'm talking about? Sort of in like small talk stins, for example.
Okay, yeah.
What was?
We fed the vocals through that same fuzz box.
Oh, okay.
So it was a useful little item, good little toy.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then just sort of rolled all the bass off. Yeah.
Right, thanks.
Yes.
David, can you talk a little bit about the Eccentric play and your other writing?
Sure. Well, I've been writing for the stage, and these are multimedia productions in that they incorporate everything from music, obviously, the drama aspect, buto, projections, film, a little bit of macabre dance. And but I find that platform very appealing because it is so broad, and it just allows you to really let your imagination loose. And the one that host is referring to, the E.D. Sedgwick play, was called Silver for Gold, the Odyssey of E.D. Sedgwick, and that told the story of Andy Warhol's troubled muse, but in terms of Greek mythology. So she was living out the myth of Persephone, It's about her journey into the underworld, which was the Silver Factory, and Andy was Hades, and Bob Dylan was Orpheus. The three-headed dog, Cerberus, that guards the gates, the underworld. The three heads were three acolytes of Andy's: Chuck Wine, Ondine, and Paul Morrissey. So that all plays in. It's a mythic story, but most stories are mythic if you care to investigate deep enough. And it's certainly an area that I'm going to continue to develop, and also writing screenplays, which I've co-written 5. And the latest one is about Henry Miller and his time up in Big Sur. It's called Bohemia. And that, of all the ones that we've written so far, the writing partner, Don C. Tyler, that one's getting some action. There's a flickering amber there, which we're hoping will soon turn to a green. One thing I have learned in working in the film industry, you have to be bloody patient, even more patient than you were waiting for us to set up. So everything has to go up, like on a back burner, you know. But that's fine for me because I've got all these other plates spinning on sticks, you know. So that's fine. Back burner's fine. Yeah. And it was interesting that writing the screenplays, I really think it came into play when I was writing the book, because some of it's quite cinematic. And I know I was looking at, these were events that happened that I remembered quite clearly, but not that I consciously did it, but reading back, it reads like a screenplay, like a directive, you know, scene setter. So, yeah, I think that definitely comes into play.
Career, which album was the most fun to create, and which one are you most proud of?
That's very hard. We had a fun time, Love and Rockets, making an album called Hot Trip to Heaven, because that was very much moving away from the conventional and really putting ourselves on the spot. We went to the studio without any preparation, and I relish that edge. And it was pretty inspiring, that experience. And also, we were at a certain level where things were really building. We just had a number 2 hit single here in the States, and we were signed to RCA, and there's a lot of money being thrown our way. The record label wanted us to go on and become a big guitar-oriented rock and roll band and play in stadiums, basically. And then we made this weird record, you know, with no guitars, and loops and backward stuff and instrumentals that lasted 12 minutes, you know. And we employed Brian Eno's oblique strategy cards, which are, it's a set of cards that have, each card has one line on it, and the idea is that you take a card at random and you interpret it in the moment, and then you apply that to whatever you're working on. So it could be things like consider thy error as hidden intention, which I love, or like you are an engineer, or take the most embarrassing detail and exaggerate it, stuff like that. So we were applying this kind of surrealistic, random process. RCA loved it. And let us go, I think is one way of putting it. They gave us the option. They said, we're going to give you the option of leaving the label. So we played the record to Rick Rubin, and he loved it, and consequently signed us to his label, American Recordings. So that was real fun.
And what are you most proud of?
That's even harder. That's very hard. I don't know how to answer that. I never really think about it. I don't dwell on it. I mean, I just make the work and then I move on. And I don't know. It's usually like the last thing I did, you know. Yeah, so the last album was an album called An Eclipse of Ships. And that was recorded very quickly and with a great bunch of musicians in LA, and it turned out really well. So at the moment it's that one, until the next one comes along. Any more?
After one more, anybody else?
I got one. No one else has one. I actually just saw, this is so funny, I just came in here and you were here, which is so amazing because I love Bauhaus, but I just actually saw Peter Murphy a couple months ago, and he could not be any opposite from you, which is kind of what you expect from Peter Murphy. He makes you wait an hour, and then you go, you're waiting for hours, and then he goes in front of everyone and crosses out all the hits that you wanted to play in front of everyone, and just, thank you, just totally like exactly what you would expect. How was it working? You seem so gregarious and personable and wonderful, and it just seems like, not to say I'm sure he has his good qualities, but how was it in a band with somebody who just seems the polar opposite of all those inclusive qualities that you seem to possess? In my little bit of knowledge of what I've gleaned from these two interviews, I couldn't expect anything different from what I experienced in concert with him. So
if you read the book, dear, you'll know.
I didn't know there was a book. I just got here, but I'm gonna read it.
Peter can be the soul of charm.
I'm sure.
And there's another side to that coin. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. But I'm looking forward to the book.
Good. One more?
So speaking of which, she opened the Pandora's box. Did
Right.
you tell these guys you were writing the book? Like did you let
No.
them know? Or they
I
had
told
no idea?
my brother in confidence, and then a week later he goes and spills the beans to Daniel.
Oh.
And apparently Daniel was not that enamoured of the idea. I think his reaction was, why has he got to drag up all that old shit again? But I've sent a copy to Daniel and I sent a copy to Kevin, to my brother, and we'll see. It's my story, and it's written honestly and as accurately as I could make it, and it's written with quite a lot of compassion and empathy, and I hope that comes across. But it's the truth, and sometimes the truth is quite ugly. Sometimes it's beautiful.
Do you feel like you had to go back and filter some things after you may have told some stories and then reread and said, okay, I don't want to.
There's very little.
Someone, or did you just kind of?
Very little that is filtered, and there's very little that has been left out. There's a couple of things that have been left out, and I didn't have to think twice about leaving them out. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Of course. That's why they were left out. But there's very little of that. It's pretty much a complete story, I think. Certainly from my point of view. So, yeah. Close the Pandora's box now.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Christina.